It's a pleasure.
This is really exciting. And if I could just ask you to just tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and how you came to be doing what you're doing now.
Right. So it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to cut it short. I'll start not with my health journey before I came to England. I'll start with what happened to my husband, which really pushed me into my current career. So on the 5th of November 2015, I still remember the day very clearly, he was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. There were some warning signs before, but of course we didn't we didn't see it. Hindsight is always very, very nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, and all of a sudden, because I used to be, and I'm still part-time, a certified translator, legal translator. So, and all of a sudden I became a main carer. And I immediately knew that we had to use Ayurveda, because I'd been in touch with Ayurveda before for my own health issues, which were nothing in comparison. And I remember coming home from hospital, and there was this Ayurvedic cookbook on the worktop, which I'd only used for myself, because I always thought that, Kevin could eat anything, and, we didn't need to be concerned about his health, because he could just eat sugary and sweet things and whatever, and he wouldn't put on weight. Just because somebody doesn't put on weight doesn't mean to say that they are healthy. And he was also very fit, and that was another confusion we had, fit doesn't equal being healthy. So there were quite a lot of misconceptions that were just brushed off our table. And I remember taking this book into my hands, and I thought, and I actually looked at the the introduction, and there it was, all the signs, pitta imbalance leading to blood disorders. That's it. And I was just in that moment of time wishing I'd been cooking more with that book, and I'm still wishing it, but can no longer happen. So he didn't survive, basically, to get an even other story short. Yeah. He didn't make it. He survived 18 months. We changed, after 3 chemotherapies, we changed completely to an Ayurvedic diet. I finally convinced him, against his family's wishes, because they were just stuck on this Western medicine trail. So against his family's, opposition, we just did it from one day to the other. We just he decided that we were going to go for all the changes in one go. And we did. And for 9 months, with very low neutrophils, very low protection against viruses and bacteria, he remained out of hospital. And then he had another relapse, 4 months to recover from that, stem cell transplant, and 4 months later he died of complications. So that's...
Oh.
And in between times I had started studying nutrition. I forgot the main bit.
Right.
So because I was already with the first chemotherapy changing our diet, because I only had 1 or 2 weeks between the first chemotherapy and the second to get him back on track, because I knew what chemotherapy was. I was always against chemotherapies, and
right.
I was with a husband who had chemotherapy. So it's just God, that was very tough. Yeah, having to look and care for somebody undergoing something that you are completely against is just, yeah.
And I take it you're still against chemotherapy?
I mean, the first one was necessary because he wouldn't have survived. His white blood count was over 180. Normally he shouldn't have been alive at all. Right. Leukemic cells are very inflexible. They just don't budge. They go through your capillaries and everything that big. They don't, flex and anything. So they block everything. So he shouldn't have been alive anymore. But
Wow.
he was, and yeah.
Mm.
So
I I I find it's so difficult, isn't it, to say to anybody, don't have chemotherapy.
yeah, it needs to be
And
their choice. It's their path, but it's very hard for the person who is very closely linked. You know, like 24/7 as a partner, you are together. Like, and if you go for chemotherapy or stem cell transplant, that has huge consequences on your partner. And if that partner is not really believing in the result, it is tough to then really, and I did, you know, I supported my husband with anything I could, with all my knowledge and cooking skills or whatever.
mm,
100, no, actually 200%. Although I was so against, you know, any further chemotherapies and the stem cell transplant. So, but I think it was meant to be. You know, the universe didn't give me the chemotherapy because I would have, you know, probably not even wanted to have the first one. So he had it because I was so against it. So I had to learn a lesson.
so what can I ask, what lesson did you learn from that?
I think that from the beginning, I knew it was all about letting go. I had this big revelation. I thought this is all about letting go, and I'm still learning to let go. It's still a work in progress.
That's that's a huge lesson though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why I'm still learning it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you just like need to learn step by step that, you know, when you are so attached to a person or something or a belief, you need to allow the other person to go their way, although you can see that it's not actually, you know, helping.
Yeah.
I'm
I
still learning it with my daughter. There's still one person I'm very attached to.
Yeah. And do you know, I remember listening, and the guy's name's on the tip of my tongue and I can't think of it. He had that terrible accident and was told to have um those steel implant rods in his back, and he'd never walk again, and he chose not to, and went home in a wheelchair and spent every day visualizing the body repairing itself.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he got to the point where he saw himself in the wheelchair again, he'd start all the way back at the beginning until he could go all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And he walks now. And he was sharing a story about um, a church where people hold poisonous snakes and get bitten by them, and nobody dies
Wow.
because they believe that they won't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the power of the mind, isn't it? Mind blowing.
Yeah. And he said, when you think he repaired his own body with his mind from the wheelchair, he said he still wouldn't go and hold poisonous snakes because he didn't have their faith. And that struck me as an important understanding, that I may be able to say to you, help me with healing this thing. And my total belief that we would be able to do it, and and I was healed, something else could present itself, and I may not be able to believe that we could do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
my husband didn't believe in it. Or
but
not
he,
powerfully enough, not strongly enough.
but even if what I'm thinking was with him, he could believe it enough to actually heal his back and be out of a wheelchair, but he couldn't go and hold a poisonous snake. So with all that he believed his mind could do, there are still places where the mind can't quite comprehend that or believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is something that's quite interesting.
Yeah, there can be resistance somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That can hold us back from true healing. Yeah. And it's you either go through that blockage or you don't. I mean, I remember having a huge resistance to meditation before it all happened, and now I love meditation. There
Yeah.
was such a big resistance, and we did, and that's, I think, also part of why he had his first relapse, because we changed the diet, but we didn't go into meditation because we didn't think it was important enough. I mean, stupid. So we focused purely on nutrition, which is the basis, you know, you need the energy and you need
Yeah.
the right food, but it's not only nutrition that
It,
you
it
need to.
it's whole, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a whole complex of uh, complementary therapies, you know. Between his first relapse and the stem cell transfer, we had 4 months and he was a skeleton, and they burned his skin because he had such a severe allergic reaction to nearly 6 weeks of antibiotics intravenously. So you can imagine what his gut on the inside would have looked like,
Yeah.
because the skin is a reflection of the gut. So he was like a burnt koala bear. The only places that were not black were underneath his eyes. And he was
Wow.
shedding skin for 2 weeks. We had to hoover every day.
Wow.
He was like a snake. Anyway, so, and after his first relapse, he was a skeleton. He was like that. And within 4 months, with Kundalini yoga, with nutrition, with Ayurvedic massages, with Reiki, acupuncture, he looked like his face was, you know, round again. He looked really healthy on the outside. And that's what the hospital wanted him to boost their statistics. They saw only the outside, not the inside. The inside was still healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't heal within 4 weeks, months, sorry, not weeks. That's too short.
Yeah. Yes, no time at all, is it?
No. So maybe he would have had a bigger chance, you know, with the stem cell transplant if they'd given him more time. Yeah. Who knows? We will never know.
No. The thing is, like you said, hindsight is wonderful. And you can't live on what ifs, can you?
No, I did for a long time, but I had to stop myself.
Yeah.
The Ayurvedic practitioner I was seeing after he died, she said, "You're only hurting yourself. It's only costing you energy. You know, let go." That was, you know, one of the things, you know, to let go
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what ifs don't change anything either, do they?
No, no. And all this rumination, you know, it's just costing
And
a lot of energy.
keeping your own body in stress.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a stressor. The rumination, the constant what if thinking. You know, your brain uses a lot of energy anyway.
Yeah.
And in grief, it uses even more because it has to process what has happened. It's just like, unless it has happened to you, you know, like you've had this loss of a loved one, and I'd never had, you know, such a loss before. You just can't imagine what it means, and you can't even describe it. You
No.
can't describe it to anybody. So,
No.
and you just have to go through it yourself, and then you get a glimpse of what others, you know, may be feeling in the same situation. But it's never one to one. It's not the same for everyone, of course.
No.
But but you get a glimpse, a better idea.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? The connection between the gut and the brain. When I was doing the course conversational intelligence, Judith Glaser talked about the 6 brains, and she said that they believed there was a 7th, which was just under the skin. And the 6th one that they were very excited about was the gut brain.
okay. Because I would always refer to the gut brain at least as the second, not the sixth, in
Well,
importance. It depends on what the others are, because I haven't heard of 6 or 7
it
guts.
wasn't that it was less important, it was the last of the ones that they discovered
Okay.
that the scientists were the most excited about.
Okay.
The connection between the brain and the actual overall health of human beings.
Yeah, they're still making this discovery. I only read the other day that there's still doubt among the scientific community that our gut microbiome, the whole microbes that live in our gut, they actually can influence the brain. There are some people with such, I don't know, they're strong scientists. I don't know how to call them. They really want to know which specific bacteria or fungi or whatever is causing or producing which specific metabolite, and the specific pathway where it reaches a specific area in the brain, and otherwise you won't believe that there is a connection. And I'm thinking, just, I know that my diet really helped me stabilize my mood, still helps me, and I have this more positive outlook. If I were eating processed food all the time, pizzas and bread and whatever, I wouldn't be looking like this. I wouldn't be smiling, and because I've got this body type that's really like easily getting out of balance by anything that's heavy, and grief is very heavy to carry. And I was in danger of getting severely depressed after the first 3 months, because I wasn't having 3 regular meals, my happy meals that my Ayurvedic doctor called them happy meals, because of the fiber in vegetables and protein makes our beneficial gut bacteria happy and thrive. So that's why it's called happy food. So, and it's just so important for me to, keep my diet light, because, in Ayurveda, we always use the opposites to get everything back into balance. So when you are getting this heavy imbalance, you need to counteract this with light.
Right.
But then too much light is also not good, because that can, get us into another imbalance. So it's always tricky.
So could you explain what would be heavy and what would be light?
Heavy, anything that's difficult to digest, and therefore needs more time for digestion, like bread, red meat, dairy is very difficult to digest.
Right.
So they can and they can in a person like me, who has everything in excess anyway, can produce excess mucus. So that makes everything very sluggish, and that's also increasing the heaviness. So, and also it slows down the thyroid, and that then really slows everything down. All our metabolism, not just digestion, and we then have low energy, constipation, hair loss, all sorts of things. Yeah. So.
And what is light?
Light would be anything that's easy to digest. So, for example, my stewed apples, they feel light. Anything, like when you have eaten something, maybe you're all just eating, and you can tune in with your stomach. Like what does it feel like now? If everything feels heavy, and you feel tired, then you've eaten the wrong thing. Right?
Right.
So potatoes, normal potatoes, not sweet potatoes, can make me feel heavy with red meat and um, just pasta, like that sort of thing. The combination is just, I get very, very tired from that, and it also feels very heavy in my stomach.
Mm,
It takes a long time to process.
yeah. I used with pasta, I use buckwheat pasta
Yeah, much easier.
and red lentil
Mm,
pasta.
mm. Yeah, so there's plenty of alternatives if you want to have pasta.
There are, I mean, they didn't used to be the
Mm.
alternatives. Um, Even with flour, I buy buckwheat flour,
Mm-hmm.
and they just didn't used to be there.
Yeah, and that increases your variety of food immediately, doesn't it? If you don't just stick to wheat flour, but you vary it with chickpea flour, buckwheat flour, quinoa flour, rice flour, all those spelt flour, rye flour. But although rye is a bit tricky, have to be
And
careful with that one.
what about almond flour? I mean,
Oh yeah, great, great
coconut.
substitute. Yeah, because it's just like it's not. It is like flour. You can use it like flour, but it's also got a lot of magnesium,
Yeah.
so it's great, and fiber, of course. So it's perfect.
Now, so I'm guessing that what makes you feel heavy could possibly make somebody else feel light.
Um, More balanced, I would say, not light, but some people who are more like here, like very easily stressed and not grounded, they can feel more grounded eating more wheat.
Right.
So it depends on our body type, really.
Right.
So, yeah, we're all different, and that's why diets never work for everybody. And the, the, the The interesting thing that I've found, like reflecting back on diets that I've tried and or I've seen other people try, is that they're always like, maybe not always, but very often created by people who haven't got these problems.
Yeah.
So they can't put themselves into other people's shoes, but they say, oh, you just start counting calories and you eat bread with, like this sort of sausage and a little bit of cheese, and that this will make you lose weight. There was this person in the Netherlands who became very famous with this sort of diet, and I just had a look at what I'm supposed to eat, and I thought, if I eat this, I'm going to put on weight. This is not going to work for me.
Yeah.
So it's, but yeah, I don't believe in diets
No.
whatsoever,
No.
and
And and
actually, yeah.
and does that change through life then, where different ages, whether a food might be a light food for you when you're a certain age and then becomes a heavy food?
Mm, that's an interesting question. As we grow older, we do enter the Vata stage of life, and Vata is like one of the qualities of Vata in Ayurveda is light. But I wouldn't say that we become light as we age. It really depends on our body constitution. But again, when we enter that stage, it's menopause for women, and yeah, men also go through menopause, but in a different way. Then we have to be really careful that this Vata, all the Vata qualities like subtle, mobile, light, rough, they don't go out of balance even more because we are in this Vata stage of life. it's like the children are in the kapha stage of life, and kapha is like they get all mucousy. That's a sign of kapha. So
Right.
they get all these ear infections, colds, frequent colds and things. So they have to be really careful to eat not food that is increasing their kapha even
Right.
more. So it depends, yeah, and it also depends on the seasons. Like Vata is very high in autumn because everything is just, there's a lot of wind, and Vata is also the elements of air and ether. So if there's more air, then Vata goes out of balance. So we need to ground, and
Right.
especially when you're a Vata person, the long, tall, thin persons, they have long features, long fingers, long nose, tall, don't put on weight very easily, and those sort of have a Vata constitution. They have to be really, really careful in autumn to not go out of balance and get even more scattered.
Right.
So it's very
Wow.
interesting. Ayurveda is just like it's once you understand it, it's so easy to see where people get their imbalances from, and then the diseases, because
Yeah.
they're just like stacking up all the imbalances, and then they become something bigger and chronic.
Mm. But Ayurveda is a Indian based.
Yeah, it's a traditional system of medicine in India. So they used it for, I think, 5,000 of years, and then the British came, and they, like Ayurveda had to go underground because, Brits introduced their own system of medicine, and now it's just like enjoying a revival. So there's more and more Ayurvedic practitioners worldwide.
Right.
Um, so you may hear more and more about it.
And it's interesting because in India diabetes is really high,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
they have the same problems as us,
but
not sticking to the traditional thing.
even more than here,
Hmm.
it's actually absolutely normal to have at least one member in the family who's diabetic.
I wonder whether it is more in families where they don't stick to, where they are not following the Ayurvedic principles, or whether it's in general. Because I don't think that when people follow the Ayurvedic principles, they know when they are in danger of getting diabetes, because I'm one of those. So that was one of the reasons why I was more careful with my diet, because I didn't want to get diabetes. It runs in my family. My mother has it. My grandmother had it. And when you're a kapha type person, you are more at risk of getting diabetes. And I'm a kapha person in my body. I'm more pitta in my mind. So
Right.
yeah. So I have to be really careful. But I haven't got these weight problems anymore. So
But that's interesting. So the mind and body can be opposite.
yes. It's very interesting, and it's like two persons like a schizophrenia. Yeah, my pitta mind and my kapha body, they are very often in opposition. Kapha is like, oh, let me sit on the couch, and just be lazy and not do anything. And Pitta says, no, you get up and you have to do some work. It's so funny if you see these characteristics in yourself. It's like this person I was listening to yesterday in an interview. She said that, about childhood trauma. The one way of this inner critic. And I've got this pitta and kapha critic. Like fighting with each other
You got
on
one on
top of
each
the
shoulder.
yeah, on top of the other inner critics, that you can have. I'm just laughing about it. I just recognize it, when I'm getting perfectionist, and I say, pitta, my pitta is out of balance. I need to balance it.
So,
It's not,
so you balance even things like getting caught up in perfectionism
yeah, Yes, yeah, the mind, the spirit, and the body, they are interconnected. If you notice that you're being too perfectionist, then there's some imbalance, and an early imbalance, and you can easily get it back into balance. If you ignore it and just like, there's other pitta elements and getting out of balance, then all these, you know, pitta drivers can then, cause major other imbalances. So it's really important to recognize these sort of imbalances, even in your mind.
Wow. So
I know that I'm overwhelming people with Vata, Pitta, and Kapha now. Just
no,
sorry.
no. There are people here who understand it. I know Carolyn is watching with us, and I know Lydiana is I'm not sure if Lydiana's a practitioner, but I know she studied
Good.
Chinese medicine as well, and
Yeah.
combines the two.
Yeah, those two combined is, yeah, even more powerful. You can see even more connections. Yeah.
So yeah, so they won't be overwhelmed. But what fascinated me, what you said earlier as well, is the fact that you can be fit and not be healthy.
Yeah.
And not many people look at that. They talk about being fit equates to being healthy.
Yeah, that's true. And until my husband died, he was still trying to always get fit. Like it was so important to him, but he never really got 100% healthy again. He was just still on his way to healing. And yeah, whenever I hear somebody saying, "Oh, he had a healthy diet, and he all of a sudden he died," I'm thinking, if I looked into that person's health history, I would find reasons why this person died, and of an illness, of course, not a natural cause. But health is just like more than fitness. And even, myself, I wouldn't call myself healthy at the moment because grief has caused so many imbalances in my body and I'm still healing. So I'm on the mend. I'm making small steps, but I'm nowhere where I was before my husband died.
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare me to what I looked like 3.5 years ago, it's different people.
Yeah. I mean, grief changes you in every way, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it causes a lot of and I think again it has to do with age, with your past medical history. How was your health before your loved one died, and all the imbalances grief causes in your body, because that's then part of your genetics and the microbes in your gut. Like how many of them do you kill because of your emotional stress response? Because our gut bacteria are very sensitive to stress.
But
So
if you kill those bacteria, you can get them back.
oh yeah, I mean, maybe not all of them, because it depends. If you take antibiotics, and I had an antibiotic, a lot of antibiotics after surgery when I was young, and that caused my initial health issues, just briefly. Then maybe they've wiped out one strain, but I will never know because they didn't investigate my gut microbiome before they did the surgery, and they didn't do it afterwards. So I will never know what I lost. But you can always, like change the diversity and the composition by the variety of food you eat. The more variety of gut microbes you have, and the beneficial ones, hopefully, because they thrive on fiber. So, and every beneficial, strain wants different types of fiber. So that's why I always promote, people try to introduce many different foods into your diet. And when people are gluten intolerant, I say, great, because you now have to introduce, or actually not have to. You're now on an adventure of discovering that food can be so much more than just wheat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I discovered this myself, when I'm not gluten intolerant, but I do respond negatively to gluten.
Mm.
And when I had to start to cut out the gluten and reduce it, I discovered, all this buckwheat and amaranth, quinoa, kamut, all the other grains and beans, and it's just like, yeah, I see it as an adventure. I see it as something positive.
Yeah. And once you can see the adventure in it, that changes everything as well.
Yeah, it's the mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was very difficult for me. I mustn't, like say it was easy, because society is not geared towards
Yeah.
people who have to avoid gluten and wheat.
Yeah.
Everything, once you go out of your house, I mean, vegans have helped us now, but before, veganism became big, there wasn't much choice.
No.
You went out and every sandwich was made of wheat.
Yeah.
And now at least you have a little bit of spelt and rye, which do contain gluten, but I can digest them better.
Yeah.
So,
It's interesting. I was away with my husband when he was working. It was a few years ago now. And I went into this pub and tried their food. And it was really nice food. And I took him there for a meal then one evening. And they had a lot on their menu of gluten-free. And I was talking to the owner, and I said to her, "You've got such a great selection of gluten-free." And she said the chef, his wife had a lot of problems and was gluten-free. She had to be gluten-free. And he looked into lots of recipes to suit her and introduced them to their menu. And she said there was one woman who cried in there because she had fish and chips and she hadn't been able to have fish in batter for so many years that she cried.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember, the first, like maybe 5, 10 years ago, when you came across gluten-free stuff, it was boring. It was cheese mainly. Dairy is also not really good. So, and not very many vegetables. It was really not very edible.
No.
And not creative at all, and I was said, well, couldn't these people like look into it, and try to be more creative, not stick to the standard, of what they are used to cook and eat, but look a bit outside the mold and what else is there to replace wheat.
Yeah.
Not just leave out the wheat and to present that person with, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I got diagnosed diabetic and there was no low carb diet then, it wasn't known about. But the luckily the diabetic nurse said to me, "Don't eat the way the NHS recommends." She said,
Yeah.
and she loaned me a book. And at first, all I could focus on was what I couldn't have.
Yeah.
And all I saw was, I can't have this, and I can't have this, and I can't have this. And then I thought, what if I focus on what I can have? And the lists of everything I could eat And even if it was some things, well, make it really small portions or just now and again, it was vast.
Yeah.
And like I said, the buckwheat flour knack wasn't available then, but you could send away for it, but you had to send.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're focused on all the good stuff that you can have, and what I realized was the food I could eat was really good food, and yet it was being looked at as, oh, why do I
Yeah.
have to eat that?
Yeah.
And seeing the things like pizza and processed foods as giving something up.
But that was exactly what my husband's family was, thinking. Poor Kevin, he has to give up, like the alcohol and, fish and chips and drinking beer. And we agreed that we were on this adventure, that we were actually discovering spices and herbs, and our food was so much more flavorsome than before and so much more varied, because before we were just like sticking to 10 recipes, like, and I was always struggling, what shall I cook tomorrow, what shall I cook today, like I really had to have the ingredients in for a recipe, and now I just like look into my pantry and look into my fridge and saying, okay, we've got these vegetables, I've got beans, so let's put them together and put some spices in, and and then you've got a new recipe. Like that's why I don't like calling the recipes I recommend recipes, because they're just meal ideas. You can adapt them, to your taste, to your needs, to what you've got in your fridge. It's just, I invite people to be creative.
Yeah. And that opens up a huge amount of possibilities, doesn't it?
Yeah, because people in prehistoric times, they didn't have cookbooks. They just cooked
No.
with whatever was available.
Yeah, that's right. And I know what I wanted to ask you is, why, if you normally eat a food and your body for some reason rejects it, and you've eaten it, and then suddenly you find you're running back and forth the bathroom and sick, and why would the body do that with the food that it's used to having?
Well, I would need to ask a few questions, but my first intuitive thought would be, when we eat something for years and years and years, right, and we grow older, and this food actually has never agreed with us completely, but our body could tolerate it. But then as we grow older, our stomach acid levels drop, we don't make as many digestive enzymes, or we are highly stressed, right? So our digestion is not as optimal. Then we get all sorts of responses, well, or the response that we would normally have experienced earlier, but we could tolerate. We reach this limit of tolerance,
Right.
and then because we've eaten it so often and we actually can't tolerate it, it becomes like a foreign invader. The immune system then kicks in,
Right.
and we get a negative response to the food we thought we could have. Like gluten, for example. A lot of people say, oh, I've always eaten gluten without any problems. They
Hmm.
might actually not have been aware that they had issues, because, I wasn't aware of my digestive issues before I did
Yeah.
Ayurveda. So it's this tolerance, like, where is your tolerance level to certain food? People in Japan and in China, where they eat a lot of rice, that's the only countries where they can actually also get allergic to rice, because they need it every day. So because you eat it every day, um, And you usually combine it also with other foods, right? And the combination can also be a factor, because when you eat something you can't tolerate very well, your body is just about able to cope, and you combine it with something else, then the body can actually also respond negatively to the food you combine it with.
Right.
So that's how you can get multiple food intolerances and sensitivities.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's a process. It usually doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. What happens to somebody like in Japan or China and they suddenly say, I can't eat rice anymore?
Then they will just have to eat something else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes up such a big part of the diet, though, doesn't it?
yeah. It doesn't happen very often. Rice allergies are not very common, but if they happen, they usually happen in countries where they eat a lot of rice.
Right. I wonder though if it's like the gluten, where their body sort of tolerates it for most of their life and they don't even realize it's a problem.
That's what I wanted to say, because when the body just about tolerates it, there's still some irritation in the gut.
Mm,
And if that irritation happens very often because you eat that food very often, then that can become inflammation. And when you have chronic inflammation, you can get something that's called leaky gut. And when we get leaky gut, we get undigested food particles and bacterial waste, because they poop and wee like us. And that gets into your bloodstream, and that's when the immune system becomes alert, you know, alert and gets on high alert. And then it doesn't like undigested food particles in the blood.
mm,
And that's, how food allergies develop, autoimmune diseases. Once it gets out of the gut into the body, because the gut is not in the body, it goes right through. And the only thing that should go into the body from the gut is nutrients, nothing else. But
wow.
when the openings in the gut lining become wider, then we can see that undigested food particles can get through as well.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I love ghee, and fiber also helps, because the beneficial bacteria, they keep that barrier, the gut lining intact, so
Right.
that these sort of foreign substances cannot enter the bloodstream. So
Mm,
you have less likelihood of food allergies and sensitivities and autoimmune diseases.
yeah. And it's funny because there seem to be more allergies now, and you know, children with nut allergies.
Yeah.
Um, I never heard of nut allergies as a child.
Well, the thing is, and what we always forget, and what I forgot as well, um, about my daughter, when my daughter was born, that was 1 year after my bowel surgery, after they treated me with antibiotics, and my daughter had problems. She had a rash around her, bum.
Yeah.
And I was very concerned about it, and it was probably treated with antibiotics. The doctors never tell you, or not in those days anyway, if you didn't ask. So I was a very concerned first time mother. But of course, with my nutritional background now, I can look back and see that she inherited my microbiome, which was imbalanced because of the antibiotic treatment. She got my unhealthy microbiome, and that has actually set her up for depression.
Right.
So you can see, when children are born from mothers whose gut microbiome was already imbalanced, and they inherit the imbalance, then they also get our regular standard diet most of the time, not fiber, and a lot of children don't exercise, and stress levels are higher as well.
Mm,
So they get all these diseases earlier. My daughter got gut issues much earlier than I did.
Right.
And my stress levels at school were 100% less than her stress levels at school.
Right. Wow.
So it's all these factors combined that make, and also you mustn't forget about the kapha, the strong kapha element when children are in that phase. And allergies have to do with the lungs, the respiratory system, and mucus can, very easily, accumulate in these areas.
Wow. It's so complex though, isn't it?
Yes, well, I like complex, but Ayurveda says when something is complex, treat with simple.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get somebody back into balance, but you have to start at the top, at the very beginning, and that's in the mouth.
In the mouth.
Yes, that's where our digestion starts, so we have to start in the mouth. I used to ignore it until I studied Ayurveda. I did nutritional therapy first, the functional medicine sort of thing, where we look at the science, evidence base, supplements, and that sort of thing. And then I did a year of Ayurveda, and then I finally understood what digestion was all about.
Right. Wow.
So, because like Hippocrates said, everything starts in the gut. Well, the diseases, but digestion starts in the mouth. So when we don't drink very much, we get a dry mouth. We can't digest our food well, and we start digesting carbs in the mouth.
Ah.
If that doesn't happen, or only partially happens in the mouth, then our stomach has to do more, right? And
Yeah.
digestion costs 60% of our overall energy. So all the energy we get from the food we eat, 60% of it goes back into the next, digesting the next meal. So you can see that if we don't take the time to eat properly, we don't chew, we don't drink enough, so that everything is, we have the right amounts of saliva, the right amounts of stomach acid, enzymes and bile, then the whole digestive system has to work so much harder to digest the food.
Yeah. What do you think of intermittent fasting? Do you think it's good or only for some people? Or
Well, the intermittent fasting that I do and I recommend is the one that Ayurveda recommended for 5,000 years. It's nothing new. It's just like something to sell. Um, you stop eating at 7 and you don't start eating until next morning at about 7. That's intermittent fasting, giving your digestive system a rest for about 12 hours.
so going a couple of days without eating?
No, I wouldn't recommend that unless you're. No.
I know some people have said, "Oh, I for one day a week I only drink water. I don't eat anything," and that makes me miserable.
Well, I tried that a few times to lose weight and it never worked.
No, and
Actually,
it makes me miserable and it makes me feel stressed.
why would you deprive yourself of food, right? You need the nutrients, yeah, and our body loves routine. It loves 3 meals, regular meals a day, because we make the stomach acid then at the same time each day, and the stomach acid needs to be at the right level. So if we ignore these signals and we just override them, then our body becomes confused. When am I supposed to make stomach acid? Right? And then we don't have the right amount of stomach acid. All these people with acid reflux, nausea, and other digestive issues, they actually have low stomach acid, not high stomach acid. There's
Right.
very few people who really suffer from high stomach acid.
And yet they think they're suffering, and they're taking things to
To
reduce.
eat, to lower it more, yes. It's just vicious circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always shook our head when I was studying nutrition, about doctors. prescribing PPIs and not realizing that people then get nutrient deficiencies and all sorts of other problems.
Mm. That's
The first case study we had to do was actually about a person who was on PPIs.
wow.
So really looking into that, because it's so common that people, and they can just buy it over the counter. They don't even have to go to a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, wow. And when I was in India, they said I went to an organic health farm, and they did lots of natural remedies. And they said one of the finest things for wind
Yeah,
was black pepper.
yeah. It warms up the digestive system. And our digestive system, you know, like we have to stoke the fire. So the whole digestive system, especially the upper part, there has to be this what we call agni, and there's various translations for it, but one is, you know, digestive fire or strength, you know, and if you Google it, and agni, then you'll see a fire burning, because food needs to be cooked, and then you can process it. If you eat raw food or leftover food or cold food, it has to be cooked.
Yeah.
And again, it's about energy, right? It takes more energy to cook it in your stomach and then digest it, break it down, and then process it further.
Yeah.
If you already cook it and you eat it warm and you then chew it as well, everything becomes so much easier, and you're helping your body and you're helping yourself.
Yeah. That's I'm gonna have a quick look, see. I think everybody that wanted to be here couldn't be here. Carolyn's with us, but they can drop questions, can't they? And
Yes,
you
yeah.
you can answer. I can always let you know. And if you could also put into the comments how people can connect with you.
I'll try to do that now.
You don't have to do it now. Just
oh, okay, yeah, in the comments, yeah.
yeah,
okay.
just after. Drop all
Yeah.
your contact details, you know, how to connect with you, where you are, everything you offer in the comments, and then people know how to get in touch with you. And of course they can get in touch with you just by you're in this group, so they can connect with you.
Yeah, they can send me a direct message or an
Yeah.
email. Or, yeah.
Yeah. But if they want to, you know, look at what you offer,
Yeah,
put that in
exactly.
the
And
comments. And
yeah, as I said about this lady who's reacting now to homemade food, you know, there would be a lot of questions I would normally ask, you know, to really assess the whole situation. Just
yeah,
it's just one thing I'm immediately, you know, like thinking of.
yeah. Thank you. I know it was a difficult question. If you don't have the full information, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
As you say, everything's, you know, like complex, and there can be many factors involved. So.
yeah. But thank you ever so much for joining us today, and thank you for being there, Carolyn, and thank you everybody else who listens later. We're going to stop the live stream now and say goodbye to everybody here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There we are. That stopped the live stream.